Once upon a time, and it was a very long time ago, at the edge of a very large forest, there was a tiny village. At the end of the village, on the edge of the forest, lived a little girl and her mother. The little girl's grandmother loved her granddaughter more than kittens loved mischief, and had made her a beautiful red cloak with a hood. The little girl wore the velvet riding cloak everywhere she went. She wore it so often that other villagers called her Little Red Riding Hood. One day, Little Red Riding Hood's mother asked her to take a basket of goods to her grandmother's, who was feeling sick. "Go quickly, dear, and don't wander through the forest," she told her little daughter. "Stay on the path. Grandmother is waiting." Little Red Riding Hood promised to go straight to her grandmother's. She put her red cloak and set out right away. Her grandmother's house was deep in the heart of the forest, but Little Red Riding Hood knew which path to take, and was not afraid to walk alone. She was not even afraid of the wolf. "Good morning," said the wolf. "Good morning, Mr. Wolf," said Little Red Riding Hood. Now, the wolf, as you probably know, was a wily animal and was not to be trusted. But he was very polite when he spoke to Little Red Riding Hood. "Where are you going, little girl?" the wolf asked. "To my grandmother's house," she said. "I'm taking this basket of food to her because she is sick," she answered. All his questions happily. She even told the wolf where her grandmother lived and how to get there. While she chatted with Wily Wolf was thinking about how much he would like to eat Little Red Riding Hood and her basket of food. As the wolf walked with Little Red Riding Hood, he said, You are marching along as if you were on your way to school. You should play a while and pick some flowers." Little Red Riding Hood looked around. She saw a pretty day it was, and thought the wolf was right. She should enjoy the morning and pick some wild flowers for her grandmother. Little Red Riding Hood left the path and gathered the prettiest flowers she could find. She daydreamed a little as she searched, and she forgot about the promise she had made to her mother. Meanwhile, the wolf crept down the path until he out of sight. Then he ran straight to the grandmother's house. Lickety-split. Once he caught his breath, he knocked gently on the door. "Who is it?" called grandmother. "It's Little Red Riding Hood. I brought you some cake, bread, and butter," said the willy wolf. "Lift the latch and walk in," said grandmother, for she was tucked in bed. But when she saw it was the wolf stepped in, she leaped right out, only in a faint affright. The wolf, wanting only to eat Little Red Riding Hood, pushed the old lady under the bed and disguised himself as the grandmother, and waited till Little Red Riding Hood showed up. Little Red Riding Hood had picked an armload of perfect little wild flowers. She remembered her promise to her mother about her sick grandmother. She rushes to her grandmother's house and knocked on the door. "Who is it?" called the wolf, who made a voice sound like Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother. "It's I, Little Red Riding Hood," called the little girl. "Lift the latch and walk in," the wolf said. Little Red Riding Hood thought she could see her grandmother lying in bed, with her lace cap pulled low and the covers tucked up to her chin. The wolf said, "Come a bit closer, my dear," in a high-pitched voice. Little Red Riding Hood came right up beside her. My grandmother, what big ears you have!" she said, taking a step back. "Better to hear you with, my dear," the wolf said. "My, what big eyes you have, grandmother," called Little Red Riding Hood, taking another step back. "The better to hear you with, my dear." "But grandmother, what big teeth you have, the better to eat you with," cried the wolf. With that, the wolf leaped out of bed and chased Little Red Riding Hood around the room. He was very hungry and had been looking forward to eating the little girl. But Little Red Riding Hood was too quick for the big bad wolf. She jumped out of his reach and ran to the door. Luckily, Little Red Riding Hood, the wolf, was not used to wearing a grandmother's gown. He kept tripping and stumbling over the hem, and had a hard time chasing Little Red Riding Hood. Little Red Riding Hood ran straight out of the door. "Help! Help! A wolf!" cried Little Red Riding Hood. It happened that a hunter who'd been after that wolf for days was in the woods nearby. He followed the wolf's footprints and it led straight to the grandmother's house. When the hunter heard Little Red Riding Hood's cries for help, he raised his gun quickly as a wink and shot the wolf dead. Little Red Riding Hood and the hunter went inside to find the poor grandmother rising to her feet, covered with dust from her head to toe. Little Red Riding Hood ran to her arms in a comforting hug. When she heard about the narrow escape from the wolf, the grandmother insisted on having Little Red Riding Hood and the hunter to stay to eat. Forever after, Little Red Riding Hood never left the path when she walked in the woods. The end.